the reason immigration is so costly, illegal immigration, is because people coming from other countries that don't have skills have violated those laws. And we know of cases in Colombia and Venezuela where some of the worst people, they emptied out their prisons, they can't take care of them anymore, pushed them into the United States.
Yep.
Those guys are not going to go get a job at Walmart or Home Depot.
No.
They're not going to go work at loading docks. They're
Right.
not going to go work in these distribution warehouses at Amazon. These guys are people that are going to essentially come and live in the United States, and they're either going to rob,
Right.
kill, maim, you name it, or they're going to take advantage of certain social services that exist, but they're not here to work.
Now, the crazy part about that, Ryan, is we've seen the end result of this. You can look at Europe, you can look at France, you can look at Germany, you can look at some of these places where those ideas have been adopted, and mass immigration has followed, and social services abound for these folks, and they're literally living off of the government. You talk about the book, The Age of Entitlement. That's exactly what these people are living. They're living their best life now in parts of Europe and around the world, and we're seeing the same thing in places like Michigan, where there massive immigration that's taken place. Many of them from Muslim nations, from Muslim countries, and they've literally taken over the places. Dearborn, for example, doesn't even represent anything that we would recognize as American. I was looking at video from places up there earlier this week, and it looks like a Muslim nation.
You import the third world, you become
the third world.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this because there's a critical shift, somewhere between 1924 and then 1965. And this is in the wake of like civil rights. United States is changing its orientation. And so like a lot of things came as a result of the Civil Rights Act. And we get into the whole thing of color, creed, religion,
Right.
you name it.
Right.
President Johnson was someone to change immigration policy. We used to take immigrants from like nations,
Right.
Western nations. There's a lot of things that changed under President Johnson, and this kind of in the wake of the civil rights movement.
Right.
The orientation of the United States is different. We're becoming a more open nation.
Right.
We're becoming a far more tolerant nation.
Right.
We're becoming a nation that is allowing people to come from various parts of the world that were non-traditional, non-Western. And when you think about cultural assimilation, the challenge is, no longer are these nations going to be like nations. These are not Western in orientation. They don't have a similar understanding of human rights, similar commitments, even faith commitments. And so all of a sudden now you have the 2/3 world, the lower, lower third parallel line or whatever, essentially the third world.
Sure.
African nations, India, South America, and other parts across the earth. And that on its face is not a bad thing per se, but when you start to realize the gap. So imagine, we just dealt with this more recently, but we had a number of immigrants coming from Haiti by design. So the Biden administration was bringing in thousands and thousands of immigrants from Haiti. That is a culture, that is a third world country. It is a failed nation. I'll be very clear. Not all cultures are equal.
No, they're not.
Everyone is made in the image of God.
Yep.
But what a culture values,
Yes.
what it is oriented around, what it celebrates and champions, what it thinks is evil, what it thinks is good, all of those things matter. When you import people from certain parts of the third world, you're bringing in paganism.
You are.
You're bringing in certain practices that are outlawed. Animism.
Yeah.
And so there's a spiritual aspect of that Christians should be very concerned about. And then on a practical scale, every American would care about this, Christian or non-Christian. Where, for example, we recognize that ducks at a park are not food. Ducks at a park belong in the water. They're part of the ambient
Right.
beauty of creation, and all
Right.
taxpayers pay for that. They are not. This is not where you go get your groceries.
Right.
And not kidding. Maybe some people would laugh at that, and it seems kind of funny, but it's not.
No.
They absolutely would they look at that and say, "Oh, this is a buffet."
Right.
And you say, "Well, how is that possible?" That's the culture, the custom.
What's happened, I think, Ryan, that you're talking about, you come out of civil rights, you come out of a time where blacks were looked at and viewed through a particularly racial lens. I hate using that terminology, race, because we're all one human race,
Right.
made up of multiple ethnicities. But the reality is you come out of that time period and people are hypersensitive to issues of quote unquote race, right? Color of skin. What they're conflating in that process is not simply ethnicity. They're conflating ethnicity and culture
Right.
simultaneously.
Right.
And so as a result, what happens is you have to now embrace not just a person's ethnicity, but you have to embrace their culture as well, because if you don't, then you're considered racist
Right.
or xenophobic.
That's right.
And the reality is people of different levels of melanin are all equal in the eyes of God. But man, what we do,
Right.
which is what culture is culture is all about what you do. It's not who you are. It's what you do. It's the acts that come out of your upbringing, out of your surroundings.
That's right.
Those are very different. And as Christians, we need to know that, think about that, and understand that these folks aren't connected to a biblical worldview.
Yeah.
And we also need, from a standpoint of anthropology, to be able to separate the imago Dei, regardless of ethnic makeup,
Yep.
right? And say that's a value. But man, I can make real judgments about someone's culture and say that culture is a bad culture, or that culture is not conducive to American culture, or that culture does not work in our Judeo-Christian environment that we create here. And I know people hate the Judeo-Christian piece, but the Christian environment, the Christian country that we founded.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, and so I want to articulate this just for clarity, is the 1965 Immigration Act signed by Lyndon Baines Johnson. It abolished the national origins quota system. The quota system is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about Western kind of like nations versus the third world.
Right.
And then prioritizing family reunification over skills-based entry. Very critical.
Yeah.
Because what happened, and again, age of entitlement, it changed the orientation to being more about it doesn't matter what you're bringing.
Right.
What skills are you bringing?
Right.
How are you going to help build this country?
Doesn't matter.
Are you an innovator?
Right.
What are you bringing that is of value?
Right.
Right. No longer does that matter. It's just you're a body.
Yeah.
You're a warm body. Just bring them on over. And so that changed. So this act flooded the U.S. with unassimilated migrants and transformed our demographic
did.
forever.
It did.
And so that was 1965. So I just want to be clear. We're 60 years into
That process.
and how people think or assume
Yeah.
that should be done.
So we can see the fruit of that on the streets, right? In LA, we can see the fruit of that in sanctuary cities, right? Where migrants have flooded overwhelmed systems, overwhelmed structures, and based upon the benevolence of some governor who gets some
Right.
kind of a kickback, the people that live there absolutely suffer under that kind of rule.